whenever you're hitting that perimenopause phase and you're starting to see changes in the frequency of menstrual cycles, and you're starting to see changes in the duration of your menstrual cycle, and you see the complexity of managing your glucose levels or trying to manage your glucose levels, you're seeing how much your insulin sensitivity changes. It does start to throw off triggers in the background, and when you hit that more physical stage of hot flushes, the cramps in your legs, when you're seeing even mood swings becoming much more frequent, you're trying to find information out there to support the evidence behind what you're experiencing, or to give you a rationale for what you as a woman with diabetes are experiencing.
Welcome to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. My name is Melissa Slemp, a certified nutritional health coach and the founder and CEO of Abundant Health with Melissa, where I help women with type 1 diabetes to feel more empowered and live their best life despite their diagnosis. Each week, I will bring conversations and strategies from guest experts and my experience living with type 1 for over 40 years now. So if you're a woman ready to redefine how diabetes can look and feel for you, then the Type 1 and Midlife podcast is the show for you. Well, hello. I am so excited to be able to share Dawnie Adams with you today. She's our guest on the show. She was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes in 1993 at the age of 22, and she is married with 4 sons and is currently using the Android APS do-it-yourself Loop for her daily management of diabetes. And she works as a midwife in a large teaching hospital where she's applied and lived understanding of diabetes and pregnancy, and how this has been beneficial in shaping her appreciation for multi-disciplinary working and good communication, and how important it is to not only understand what our body is going through during perimenopause and menopause, but be able to communicate that with our doctors and our healthcare team and just everybody around us. So today, what you can expect is we're going to dive into what exactly we can expect when perimenopause through menopause is happening, and how our body is feeling, and how it does affect our insulin sensitivity. And we're going to talk about hormone replacement therapy, both of us sharing our road through this as part of our care. And, we're just going to wrap up with how important peer support is. Living with diabetes can be isolating enough, but when we're going through something that can have a little bit of stigma attached, such as menopause, and you are trying to do this alone, it doesn't generally work as well. So today we're going to empower you with what to talk about and the questions to ask your doctors about, so that you're better equipped and better able to go through this time in your life. And I want to refer you to my group coaching, which is an amazing group of ladies in midlife, also managing type 1 diabetes. And we meet and talk about topics just like this. So you are welcome to check that out. You can click the link in the bio to reach out and to learn more about this. And I hope you enjoy this very enlightening conversation with Dawnie, and let us know what you think. And if you have questions, and you have a chance to connect with Dawnie online as well. So again, enjoy. Just a reminder that nothing you hear on this Type 1 and Midlife podcast should be a substitute for professional medical advice. Please always consult your medical professional before changing your diet, insulin dosages, or healthcare plan. Well, here we are. I'm excited to share this space today and this conversation with Dawnie Adams, and she has been an incredible part of our community, and I'm starting to learn more about her. So I'm really happy to share you with our listeners. Hello, Dawnie.
Hello there. How are you?
I'm doing good. If you want to share a little bit more about your diagnosis, living with type 1, And then we're going to dive into the topic today, which is so it's so pertinent with our show here, which is women in midlife, perimenopause, and the menopause journey. And we need support with that. So that's why you're here. So it's a great topic.
Yeah. So my name is Dawnie, and I have lived with type 1 diabetes for 30 years. I was diagnosed in my final term, as it was back then, as at university. I was training at that stage to be a primary school teacher at Queen's University in Belfast in Northern Ireland. And following my diagnosis, I had been told that I probably wouldn't live long enough to have children or to experience pregnancies successfully. So I focused very much on that in the next couple of years and went on to have 4 healthy sons who are now aged between 19 and 25 years of age. Mm-hmm. They're all big, strong, strapping boys who I have to physically look up to, and who I'm still very much in contact with. 3 of them still live at home with us here, and my eldest son lives down in Belfast with his girlfriend.
Very nice.
After my 4th son was born, I had a rethink about my career options. I'd been teaching at that stage for 13 years. And I went back and I decided to retrain as a midwife because my own experiences of pregnancy were that midwives seem to be quite challenged by looking after someone with diabetes. And obviously type 1 is itself quite a complex condition and often blindsides us as the people living with the condition, and certainly seem to blindside a number of the healthcare staff I came into contact with. So after, again, I think 13 years seems to be my ultimate length of time to be doing anything. So after 13 years of working as a midwife, I went back and I started studying for a PhD in the field of type 1 diabetes, pregnancy, and wearable technology. That journey is now coming to an end. It's lasted longer than I anticipated it lasting. And I'm also have had the opportunities as a result of that research work to become much more involved and active within the diabetes community, both here in Northern Ireland and online, thanks to the sponsorship of the German Diabetes Online Community, or DEDOC, which has facilitated this particular journey that I'm now on with menopause and diabetes. The 2 things happily collided at the same time, and it's led me down a very different path than I ever saw myself going 30 years ago. But hey ho, here we are. And
here you are. Yeah.
Happy to share.
Yeah. You brought up an important part of your story, the journey as to why you did what the path you took with midwife. When I was 27 years ago, because my daughter Sarah is now 27. But when I was pregnant with her, prior to my pregnancy, I was seeing a midwife, for my care. And I became pregnant. I was working with her for a little bit. She was all on board. But the doctor that she had to practice under was not on board with high-risk type 1 Melissa. That would be me. So I was like I don't even know. I was probably 4 or 5 months into a pregnancy when she had to sever the relationship and I had to find another OBGYN. Isn't that incredible? So here, again, that was years ago. So maybe it's gotten a little bit more accepting, a little bit more knowledge as far as how to care for those of us with type 1 going through a pregnancy. So tie in there.
I think the research that has been carried out in the last 30, 35 years in particular has had a massive impact on how educated healthcare professionals have now become, and how we as people living with diabetes have also become. As I said, I sort of went from being 22 and having no concept of what diabetes actually meant to suddenly overwhelmed with information, overwhelmed with some of the fear as well. And in my first pregnancy, I was recruited because the Royal Victoria Hospital in Belfast is a large teaching hospital. It was the only centre at that stage which looked after women with any type of diabetes here in this province. And I was recruited into a research project which was investigating glucose monitoring pre and post meals.
Okay.
So I was in the control arm. So I was unfortunately in that part of the study where I was doing what we traditionally did here in Northern Ireland and across the UK at that time, where we were testing glucose levels before meals only. A friend was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes on the same day as I was. We were in the same hospital together. We'd gone to the same talks together.
Yeah.
And
are you still connected with her?
I am indeed. We celebrated our 30th anniversary there back in April by going out for lunch together.
Nice.
And she literally lives less than a mile from my front door here.
Gosh, wow, what a blessing. Wow, that's amazing.
Geographically, we've sort of stayed very close, and we keep in touch now via WhatsApp and social media, and our children have gone through school together. Her nephews and nieces would be friendly with my children as well.
Nice.
But she was in the intervention arm, so she was doing the post-meal testing as well. So she was testing 8 times a day. I was testing 4 times a day. And the project that we were in has been rolled out globally initially. And I think in my mind, because obviously it's all about us, I'm firmly of the opinion that that's where the drive to get some method of monitoring glucose levels more frequently throughout the day for all people living with type 1 came from. Whether or not that's true is a totally different argument. But in my head, that is where that comes from. And that's why we've now got so much access to CGM.
Yes, that's a great trail of the story. Yes. And well, I went through a pregnancy without a CGM. It's funny how we look back, and it's like you do with what you've got. I mean, we didn't know any different. So it obviously worked just fine. I had a healthy pregnancy. She was a 7-pound baby. So, all that fear of the large babies with anybody with diabetes, I'm going through that. So very tight control and a lot of time, more appointments, more sonograms, all those things just to keep an eye, but everything definitely worked out good. So, and this brings the topic, and I know we're going to jump around today, which is kind of what a conversation is too. But I knew little about hormonal effects. In other words, my monthly cycle when I was in my reproductive years. And again, education, we didn't know to ask. It's now much more prevalent. Social media is definitely helping with that. The availability of finding this out. I don't even think the doctors correlated it with our care, throughout a monthly cycle. It's incredible. And it makes sense, doesn't it?
I think that's incredibly true. I know certainly whenever I then went on, because I was testing 4 times a day up until 2006, I think it was, we weren't seeing those massive swings. We just knew that insulin wasn't doing what it normally did for a period of time. And again, because we're all so different, for some of us, we're much more insulin resistant in the run up to a period. Some of us are much more insulin resistant during a period. Again, because there's not a one size fits all with diabetes, and certainly not with type 1 diabetes. And when I was trying to have those conversations with my consultants at the clinics, it felt like I was shouting into a void and not actually being heard. It wasn't until I was doing my midwifery degree, again at Queen's down in Belfast, that for my final dissertation, I wanted, obviously, to look at diabetes and pregnancy. And I came across an article in the editorial column of the New Yorker magazine. And it was written by one of the reporters who had a daughter with type 1 diabetes. And they were talking about the glucose fluctuations. So because by this stage, testing between 8 and 12 times a day was much more common, certainly in the Western world. they were reporting back on seeing these fluctuations happening and how there was no support still from um, endocrinologists or from gynecologists or from obstetricians. And that really started to trigger a much bigger interest for me, because this was a journalist feeding back, and I still couldn't find anything in research papers to validate the lived experience, which is really where research is grounded in. It's how researchers are inspired to develop a program of work or a research study, because people are asking the questions, and the intensity with which those common themes are coming up is something that can maybe lead a doorway to appear, or for people, for people to walk through to identify what the common problems are and the issues are of people living with this condition in particular.
Yeah, definitely. And you brought up a good point too on how unique and individual we are. And it's important. I think, first thing I think of when you were mentioning that is how important it is. Research is good. I think research helps validate what we think, right? Or what we believe, or what the common trends are showing, or the common evidence is showing. But the research really starts within ourselves, doesn't it? Because we really have to be aware of where we are, how we're feeling, the effects of insulin on our blood sugar, and all of that. So it is important, I think, just to be in tune with our own numbers and our own reactions and all of that. So what do you think? This is a big question. Perimenopause and menopause. So how is it different for women with type 1? And this is a good question too, because there might be some listeners here who haven't quite made it to perimenopause. And it's such a gray area anyway, isn't it? For many women without a chronic disease, we know what's going on with their bodies. Again, that relationship with the doctor, whether or not they're getting hormone tests, that's another whole topic. Whether or not they're even getting any sort of, again, there's the evidence as to their hormones dropping and those levels dropping and how it's affecting them. So why is it different for us?
I think because we're so used to having episodes or big swings in glucose levels, particularly around menstruation and particularly during pregnancy, that postpartum period. Whenever you're hitting that perimenopause phase and you're starting to see changes in the frequency of menstrual cycles, and you're starting to see changes in the duration of your menstrual cycle, and you see the complexity of managing your glucose levels or trying to manage your glucose levels, you're seeing how much your insulin sensitivity changes. It does start to throw off triggers in the background. And when you hit that more physical stage of hot flushes, the cramps in your legs, when you're seeing even mood swings becoming much more frequent, you're trying to find information out there to support the evidence behind what you're experiencing, or to give you a rationale for what you as a woman with diabetes are experiencing. I know certainly whenever I was starting to have the hot flushes at night, those really intense sweats at night, where night clothes were soaked, sheets were soaked, duvets were soaked, and thinking, oh goodness, it's not another hypo. I can't cope with this. Good enough, saying that my glucose levels were actually sitting in my own personal target glucose range. Checking with finger pricks just to make sure that my glucose sensor was actually reading appropriately. And thinking,
been there,
why am I having hypo symptoms in the middle of the night and I'm not hypo? And I didn't know, and I personally didn't know enough about menopause, which sounds ridiculous given the profession that I'm in, given the education that I've had. I wasn't thinking in terms of, oh, this is probably a perimenopause thing starting to happen with me now. And again, there's an awful lot of embarrassment, I think, felt by us as women in particular, talking about physical symptoms such as those hot flushes, because you think, am I old enough to be experiencing this? Am I too young, too old? Is everybody else having this as well? And you don't know until you start having the conversations with other women. You don't know until you're trying to find out more about what's actually going on in your own body. As you say, You have to have a research interest in yourself. You are your own science experiment. You are your own N=1 when it comes to diabetes. And the more that I was experiencing the hot flushes, and then I was starting to have them at work as well. And it was that sensation of literally a fire starting inside me, spreading out into my fingertips, my toes, down my legs, down my back. And then it suddenly stopped. And thinking, that's not a hypo symptom, that's something else altogether. But within maybe an hour of those things happening, I found that I was having hypos. And looking back, it's probably similar to that increased chance of glucose in your system being used up whenever you exercise. So we know that if you go for a sprint, if you change bed linen, if you vacuum the house, if you clean the kitchen thoroughly, you're grand at the time. You don't have any issues at the time, but an hour later, you're suddenly a hot, wet mess of hypoglycemic person. And that's down to the muscle activity. It's down to the generation of the heat as well. And that in biology, it's called vasodilation, where your blood vessels in the extremities of your bodies are opening up.
Okay.
And I sort of think this seems to have a correlation with not quite hypos, but these hot flushes. Maybe it's time to start investigating the perimenopause, menopause stuff that's going on. And as I was experiencing this, it was all happening again. It's lovely the way that quite often events just line up and you get almost like a positive Swiss cheese effect where your experiences line up with somebody else's experiences. There's starting to be conversations happening across social media channels, and you suddenly find doorways opening. And there's a nurse in the UK called Annie Cooper who was hosting a GB Doc tweet chat one Wednesday night about menopause and diabetes. And I tuned in for that. And a lot of the questions that she was asking about symptoms of hypos, symptoms of hot flushes, the questions around cramps, menstrual cycles, suddenly made so much sense. And I thought, this is not just me. But because that particular tweet chat had been attended by a lot of women of a similar age from around the world, we started to have conversations in private chats on Twitter, private chats on Instagram. And then I was reading blog posts by Sarah Gatward, who has now lived with type 1 for 50 years, who's a wee little bit older than me, but was going through that journey a couple of steps ahead of me. And I was thinking, this is all making so much sense. And my own peer support group within the diabetes community were much more empowered because of those voices to come together and start talking both online, offline, and at real life meetups about our type 1 perimenopause, menopause journeys. And finding that it was a safe place. It's, you know yourself that with type 1 diabetes, you can talk about hypos with people who live with type 1 in a very different way than you can with people who don't know what diabetes is or have no lived experience of hypoglycemia. So being able to talk about the uncomfortable side effects of perimenopause within that very safe space was phenomenal. It suddenly brought a crowd of us together who were able to offer peer support. And whenever we had questions, somebody within the peer support group would have experienced that symptom or was able to signpost towards other resources that they had found. And that in itself, it's so foreign whenever you have it behind you.
It sure is. Yeah. We can feel isolated enough with type 1. And then when we're going through, you're bringing, these are two topics, two physical conditions. Obviously living with type 1 can feel isolating. And menopause, we are, even here in the States, it's getting more attention. It's not as taboo as it used to be, which is wonderful. I think even men are coming into the conversation. I think, the men that we live with and our husbands and, all of that, it's real important that it's not something that we have to hide. It's almost like this is the next stage of, like I speak for myself with myself. I hid diabetes for so many years. Yeah. And then I finally said, I'm not hiding this anymore. It's time to talk. There's people to talk with, other people to talk with, to learn from, the support groups that we have, which is why I became a coach as well, because I know we can't go through this alone. So when we can bring something that is a very natural hormonal stage that we're all going to experience, and it's going to look a little different for everybody, and the time that it comes is going to be different for every woman. But to have the support and somebody, just like you say, I keep thinking of validating, because sometimes we can get up and think we're going completely crazy, and it's like, is this just me, or is this something that other ladies are experiencing? And then we talk about the conversation we can have with our doctors, when we can be more informed about what to ask for, to be more empowered with that conversation. I see that as definitely, and this is for women with or without diabetes, just women in my life, because I'm in midlife. So I obviously have a lot of friends that are my age, just that lack of understanding, number one, what's going on with their body and what to do.
Yeah.
And it's overwhelming with decisions. Yeah.
And as I was saying, that empowerment that comes from having the conversations within a community who just understand what it is that you're experiencing has been really potent in opening up conversations. I think you're aware that we have a menopause mothers support group.
Thanks for breaking that up.
Accessible on Twitter. We also have a WhatsApp group, and the invitation's there for anyone who wants to have off Twitter conversations where you can ask slightly more personal questions, or you can have more open conversations, because it's a closed group. Nobody else can see what's being discussed within that group. But we've members from across Indonesia, Australasia, America, Canada, South America, Europe. Most of the continents are covered, India, Indonesia. It's been an opportunity for a complete sharing of global experiences. And everyone who is within the group, who's gone back to their family doctor, or has gone back to their endocrinologist, or has gone to a gynecologist to speak about their personal concerns. Obviously, each healthcare system is structured very differently. So again, that's been a learning curve in itself.
Yeah.
But everybody has said that when they've gone in to have those conversations, where before they had the peer support network, they felt very much like they were in that room on their own. Their N=1 experience wasn't taken seriously. They didn't feel that they were listened to. They didn't feel that they were receiving appropriate support. But when they're going in now, because we've all had the opportunity to share, and we've had the opportunity to discuss, and we've had the opportunity to pass on resources, information that we've been able to access within our own countries, which is widely available on the internet.
Nice.
We've
That's important.
gone in much more empowered and haven't been as easily fobbed off. I think a concern for so many women going through perimenopause, menopause, is that when you present with your symptoms, when you've said to your doctor that you've got lost libido, you've lost your enthusiasm for life to a point, you suddenly feel very self-conscious, you feel very disempowered, because those hormonal fluctuations do impact your brain activity as well. You see your body changing. you see that you look back at photographs from 20 years ago and you're not the person that you were then. But mind you, I suppose whenever you're 24 and you look back at photographs of yourself from 20 years earlier, you're also a very different person.
Mm-hmm.
There's a shame and a stigma that goes with that in society, that aging is seen as something you've almost failed by actually looking like you've lived life.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lovely line in Shirley Valentine where the man that she ends up having an affair with points to her stretch marks and calls them lifelines. Mm-hmm. And instead of us celebrating our lifelines, we quite often see them not as a badge of honor, but as something to be hidden away, not to be publicly displayed. And that's so sad. But when you go in to see your GP, you're almost proudly displaying the life experiences that you have when you know that you have a community of women standing behind you who totally understand it. And I know I personally find it much easier to advocate for other people than I do for myself. I'm not very good at saying, oh, I need this, but I have no hesitation in saying, my friend actually needs this.
It's interesting.
Speaking directly about my friend, not about me, not using my friend as the cover for me. Mm-hmm. It's been really powerful being able to go in and speak to my endocrine team, being able to speak to my GP, my family doctor, and the family practice nurse about the fact that I don't feel like I did feel, and something has changed and I need your help to help me work through this. And they've been very supportive, which has been amazing. I thought I was going to get knocked back. I thought there's no point even having this conversation. They're going to say, you're type 1 diabetes. This is what you've got to live with. Just get over it and move on. But they weren't. They were so positive, and
that's a good reaction.
They have been so willing to get me through this stage of life in preparation for my postmenopausal life, which I'm now really looking forward to, whereas I had quite a fear about that. And because, as I was saying, because depressive episodes can be quite common. And obviously we know about premenstrual tension, we know about premenstrual syndrome, we know that postpartum blues, we know that postnatal depression are issues that we don't see being discussed enough, or people who suffer those experiences feel that they're the only person in the entire world. I think whenever you go to have the perimenopause conversation with your GP, it's interpreted as a form of depression rather than as a natural phase of your life and as part of your journey from cradle to grave. It's sitting there, and it's not necessarily a depression, but it's something that quite often is brushed off as being a depression in itself.
And again, just to reiterate that it's definitely a natural stage. So what is happening to the body? I know I've gone through this myself, and I could tell my own story, and I've written articles about it as well. Just my own journey from perimenopause. It was late 40s for me. I was 48, 49 is when I started to see. It was slow. It was gradual, which it generally is for women, right? And again, everybody's different. So this is not a one size approach, to how we talk about it or how we give advice. It's just being aware. I think it's just being in tune with your body and how we're feeling. But, I noticed the weight gain. Like when you are so consistent with your habits and my exercise and diet and all that. And then suddenly I was developing 7-8 pounds around the middle and needing almost twice as much insulin. So everything, right? So, and that is something doctors are not necessarily, unless we bring it up and we say, hey, I'm noticing these other changes going on physically. I'm getting a little older. You kind of put 1 + 1, you put all the pieces together. It starts to make sense when you think about it all. And the things that you were mentioning, like low sex drive and depression, other things in the body can get out of balance. I know I had some vitamin deficiencies that were never an issue, that just kind of showed themselves. So again, what do you think about testing? And I've got pushback from the doctors as far as getting the hormone levels tested, and I hear this so often, even, for women without diabetes, just in general.
Yeah.
Oh, the doctor doesn't think it's necessary. So what do you think about that?
So here in the UK, we have the National Institute for Clinical and Health Excellence, NICE, who publish guidelines. Their recommendations for us in this part of the world are that after the age of 45, hormone testing isn't actually going to give you any specific answers. It's not going to provide that magic, yes, you are in perimenopause that so many of us hope for. I think American Diabetes Association have a similar protocol that they've rolled out in the last few years as well. I think I personally had asked about hormone testing. I was around 43, 44, so it was about 10 years ago, just under 10 years, slightly less than 10 years ago, because I had gone from 28-day cycles to 14-day cycles. And that for me was triggering all kinds of other fears, other concerns, other worries that there was something pathological happening in my body. It wasn't. I suppose that for me was the heads up. You've now changed from a normal reproductive cycle to something that's showing changes. And obviously with menstruation, we know that estrogen and progesterone are the two key hormones linked to that. Testosterone also forms a part of that. And the testosterone levels are part of what contributes to that decreased libido, which can contribute to improved skin. So when you're thinking, oh, fantastic, my skin's improving, all those that acne that I had or rosacea whenever I was younger is now starting to raise. The testosterone levels have dropped. So that's why you have that improved skin health. But the estrogen levels are the biggest driver for increasing the insulin resistance. There are a number of graphs online, and if you Google graphs for estrogen and progesterone during the menstrual cycle, you'll see that where estrogen goes up tends to be where most of us have our periods of improved insulin sensitivity. Whenever the estrogen levels dip and the progesterone levels go up, you start to see increased insulin resistance. And again, it's trying to build in other activities. So we know that physical health is important for mental health. And whenever I found I was becoming more insulin resistant, I was going out for more walks. I was going for more swims more regularly. Obviously, at that stage, my children were still in their early teens and pre-teen years. So we were out every weekend anyway, doing plenty of things. But again, it was that combination of physical activity, hypos, hot flushes, and not thinking at that stage, because I couldn't find enough research evidence that it was probably due to those hormonal cycles and that hormonal changes that were taking place. And whenever it then has now reached, the past 2-3 years, being much more clued into that and being much more aware, thanks to having CGM, thanks to seeing changes in my insulin sensitivity, because I run Android APS, which is a closed loop user built insulin system.
Understood.
I've been able to look back over graphs and pick out periods of time and go, okay, what was going on there? What was different? And seeing that while my carb intake was basically the same, while my physical activity intake was basically the same, my insulin ratios were a complete mess. They were just all over the place.
I relate. Yes. And it was frustrating going through that until I did my own research. I literally looking it up and, just kind of reaching out online with Christiane Northrup. Dr. Christiane Northrup is one that I refer to. and asking other women, it just very similar to what you've done, is just kind of gathering the evidence that, yeah, this is what's going on. Because I wasn't at a point where I was getting my tests, my hormone levels tested yet. I just saw what was happening, realizing it. And eventually, though, within that year, I guess I was probably 51 by then, is when my doctor did say, okay, yeah, let's go ahead and get those tests done, just to confirm. Yeah. And it did. It helped confirm that I wasn't going crazy and there wasn't anything else that was influencing my resistance. It's just nice knowing, right? So I think it's all about just being able to nail down the reason. And then you can decide on what your steps are going to be, to help yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Having that, I think information's power and education is powerful. Mm-hmm. It's probably one of the most powerful tools in our arsenal against diabetes itself.
You need to build a stronger foundation. Do you need a framework to better manage type 1 diabetes? I know this may sound like a silly question, and I know this is so vital for all of us, but it starts with our thoughts, right? It plays such an important role in shaping this journey and how we accept our diagnosis and how we approach diabetes management with more resilience, and how dedicated and committed we can be in order to bring a sense of freedom and really an overall happier life, right? That's what we all want. So I created a 3-step guide to empower women on how to excel in life while managing diabetes. I walk you through the ABCs to accept, believe, and commit to life with type 1, and how this mindset shift will build your confidence and help you with the day-to-day habits we all know are so important. Then you get to learn 3 specific lifestyle practices along with actionable steps you can get started on right now. If this is what you need, just click the link in the show notes and subscribe and download my free guide, How to Thrive with Type 1 Diabetes After 40, and you get to stay in touch with me and get early access to my group and my one-on-one coaching programs. So sounds like you just visit the link in the show notes and check it out. Now back to the show. So what are the options then for women as they're coming into perimenopause, approaching menopause, starting to noticing the insulin resistance, the weight gain, the moodiness, all the things, right? All the menopause symptoms. So what do you think is a good route? I have a few ideas, some things that I've used, but I'd like to know what you do and what is aiding you through this process and at this stage of life.
I think, first of all, the most important thing is to be able to find what works for you personally. For me, it has been making minor changes to my diet. So reducing portion sizes. It has been about including more fruit and more vegetables. As you've said, about other hormones being depleted as well. I know from my work and from other family members, B12 deficiency is very common in women. So trying to include sources of B vitamins, trying to include more D vitamins as well for mental health, and trying to include obviously vitamin C to fight off infections. I'm very conscious of the fact that so many people are currently in a food crisis because of financial issues, because of the cost of living has increased so much. Certainly since we've been through and come out of COVID. And it would be really inappropriate for me to say, so you must go out and buy fresh fruit every day and you must eat the rainbow of fruit every day. Not everybody can afford to do that. Not everybody's in a position to be able to do that. But if you can, making small changes to your diet is one of the steps that you can start to look at and see, does that help you with your diabetes? Does that help you with your menopause journey as well? Increasing your exercise. Again, not everybody will want to join a gym. I have never joined a gym in my life. have to be totally honest here, hold my hands up and say I've never joined a gym in my life. But
hey, we're all different. That's okay. whatever moves you. I always say too, just find whatever you enjoy doing, because that's what you will keep going and be able to sustain, because otherwise it's going to be a deterrent. So
and going out for walks with friends, even things like housework. I think it's well known and well recognized within the type 1 community that changing bed linen is guaranteed to bring glucose levels, which have been really stubborn all day, right down into the normal zone, and probably take you into hypo as well.
Just everyday busyness definitely adds
up. Everyday activities of running a household, vacuuming, dusting, cleaning the bathroom, all of those things, again, still count as physical activity. And the recommendation at a global level is that you have 30 minutes of physical exercise every day. It does not mean that you have to go out and run for 12 miles every day. It doesn't mean you have to swim 100 lengths of your local pool. If you want to add that into the mix as well, go ahead, do that. Because again, the mental health benefits of that, the mental health benefits of meeting up with friends for a walk, for swimming activities, going out with your children to the play park, or going out with grandchildren to the play park, because obviously we've all got kids at different stages of life and ages of life. Spending time with your own parents, maybe going out for a walk with them. All of those are reasonably easy to build in to daily life. And it might mean that you're having to step aside from other things that you feel are calling you, but maybe not necessarily things that are massively important, but just having that relationship with other people through some sort of physical activity is so beneficial.
Relationship building is huge.
And again, if you're using continuous glucose monitoring or flash glucose monitoring, having a look over what your previous 2-week time and range has been, and obviously our times and range are very, very different. Because we're different people, we've different diets, we've different targets that we're comfortable with. Looking at those and keeping track every once in a while of what has been a particularly successful day for you. And as I'm saying that, I'm thinking, even if we do the same thing 3 days in a row, we're going to have lots of very different results.
That's so true.
Trying to keep on top of sleep. I think we're a generation who probably didn't sleep enough in our teens and in our 20s, because the world was really opening up in the late 1970s to the mid 1990s in particular, in terms of what we were able to do of an evening and the freedom that we were being granted by our baby boomer parents. So it's maybe a case of looking back and thinking, okay, sleep is still a really good idea. And there are so many research studies out there showing that if as someone with type 1 diabetes, you're able to achieve between 6 and 8 hours sleep a night, that can reduce your insulin resistance and it can improve your insulin sensitivity.
It sure does, yes.
So trying to build in good sleep habits, have more sleep hygiene as well. And again, finding a peer support network is so important. And I know that apart from the girl that I was diagnosed on the same day with, I didn't have a particularly large peer support network here. It is a small country where I live, but I didn't really know anybody else with type 1 diabetes. And interacting with other people on social media suddenly opened up a massive community of people within 50 miles of my front door, who I'm able to meet with regularly, chat with regularly. We phone each other. We keep in contact. There isn't a day goes past that I don't hear from at least 10 different folk with type 1 diabetes. We're just checking in to see how things are. And having that as well is so good for mental health. And can also help with maybe suggesting changes to diet, suggesting things which are going to help improve your physical activity.
Right. Just to, and it's a topic that, or a term that I like to use is to crowd out. Sometimes we can identify certain things that are, as we age, that are affecting blood sugar and the way we feel, And we have to look closer at those things. Sleep is such a big part. Sleep can be hard when we're waking up with hot flashes. So there's a lot to be, but I totally agree. And I think with the ladies that I work with, that's generally where we start too, because our sleep quality affects the next day. It affects what we eat. It affects our energy to move or lack of energy to move. It affects how our work, how we're able to focus at work. It's all stemmed together and so important. And it's definitely something that you need to focus on. I think that's the first step. But personally, I think that's the first step, is to really figure out what that night of sleep, the opportunities to improve that. And we could talk about different things too. I mean, like magnesium is another one. It's very deficient in a lot of us, especially women. And that's just something you can easily put into your nighttime routine to have to take some magnesium supplements. So again, things to talk to your doctor about. And, I wanted to ask you too about hormone replacement therapy, HRT as it's known. What is this is, it's a hot topic and I hear it a lot. There's a lot of apprehension. I think that's the right word. Women they're leery about jumping into it because, they realize that it might help support them. Their doctors may be recommending it, but based on whether it's their family history, their own history with their estrogen levels, there's a lot of fear out there. And I think it's misinformation. So what can you advise with that?
I think it's worth having the conversation with your primary care provider. First of all, if that's the route that you choose to go, and I have to be totally honest and say it is the route that I did go after a lot of hard thinking about what my life was looking like at that point in time. I was initially very much of the opinion that as a woman with type 1 diabetes, it wasn't going to be an option for me because I had been told that at some point in the previous 25 years. Not entirely sure where the conversation happened. Probably around the week of diagnosis.
Okay.
Might have been in the immediate postnatal period. Kind of. It was in there. It was a conversation that happened many years ago anyway. And I remember thinking, that isn't going to be something that I can access. And then obviously the media coverage in the past of 15, 20 years ago about breast cancer and HRT therapies was very damning. And I wasn't willing to take that risk as it was presented. I started following people who were various menopause support groups across social media channels. And I started following female obstetricians who were talking about benefits of HRT, risks of HRT, types of HRT. And I started looking more into the science behind that. And I did eventually contact my GP a year and a half ago about trying HRT because I was in a complete state of overwhelm just with everything that was happening in life. And I knew it wasn't depression. I'd had postnatal depression after one of my sons was born. And I knew that this felt very different. But what I was experiencing was just not even having points in the day that were brighter points in the day. So after speaking to her, she prescribed the estrogen patches for me. And I tried those, and I tried the progesterone oral tablets. And within a week of the conversation, I suddenly felt like I'd got myself back. I wasn't crying at really random news stories. I wasn't becoming completely overwhelmed at the thought of going out for an evening to meet up with friends. I wasn't drowning in a sea of things which really didn't matter.
Yeah, that's a good, yeah.
And speaking with the WhatsApp support group was, again, particularly beneficial. Some of the girls in that group were already using different types of HRT. Some have the Mirena coil fitted. Some have the estradiol implants, or they use Depo-Provera injections, even though they're not intending to have children, but because that contains estrogen, progesterone as well.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Some of the girls who were aware that their periods were reducing were still on birth control pills, even though the chances of conceiving were very low.
Mm-hmm.
But they were talking about that, the mental health benefit of that in particular, and how that was one way to get through this very low self-esteem, very reduced self-belief period of time. So I know that other friends within that group and other friends within the wider diabetes community here have tried mix and match versions of HRT, and it hasn't worked for them. Mm-hmm. And that's totally fine, because we're not all cut from the same cloth. We all have very different responses to similar medications. We don't have, there's not ever going to be something that is ever going to fit one person. Right. And it is about trying the different options which are available, and knowing that if that option isn't working for you, you're not actually long-term tied into that one option. Mm-hmm. If it's not working for you, it's not working for you.
Yeah.
Try something else.
Yeah.
And there are a number of different options out there. So that's what I'm saying, it's worth having that conversation with your primary care provider.
Yeah.
Someone that you have a trusted relationship with, and that you can go back to and say, I have tried this. I've given this a period of time.
Yeah.
It's not doing for me what I hoped it would do. Can I try something else? Or can you signpost me towards something else?
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah. And you brought up it, the most important thing, like you say, we are here. We're here for a short time, and it's important for us to feel the best we can while we're here. And to take, just like you said, just to kind of take all the information we know about ourselves, what's important, obviously the status of our health, and, to feel confident about making these choices, and, to not feel shamed by it. Because I think there's a little stigma with hormone replacement therapy too. Even among women. And it's so individual. It's such a good topic. And it's so important, again, to have that topic and to realize that, and maybe you said this or maybe you didn't, but is it worth, like if we want to call it risk. So do I want to spend the next 20 years miserable, unfunctioning, blood sugars are all over the place, which could cause other health conditions, right? So just not feeling well and poor glucose control is not going to help our health.
Absolutely. And quite often, I think
it can definitely be a tool.
And I think your glucose control is the first thing that you let go of whenever you have other circumstances going on in life.
That's true.
I often think when people are sharing glucose graphs and the person is putting out a cry across social media for help because their glucose levels are sitting in the high 20s for days on end, thinking this isn't just about you and insulin and how much you're taking or not taking. There's something else going on behind this. There's another driver. Because you push your diabetes to the back burner to deal with something that's much more immediate in your life. Be that a loss of a job, be that the death of a loved family member, or the breakdown of a close friendship or a close relationship. Your diabetes becomes secondary to that. And it's no longer your core focus.
That is so true.
And it's okay to take your foot off the pedal with diabetes, because as the recent research published by the Diabetes Control and Complications Trial and the follow-up EDIC study have shown, you do have a metabolic memory. And if you've gone for a number of years with fantastic, phenomenal, truly award-winning glucose control, Having 2 or 3 months where you try to find what's working for you at that phase in your life isn't going to have the same long-term negative health impacts that we've internalized and that we think it's going to have.
Yeah,
and
really good.
It's okay to take that.
Yeah, it's okay.
To release that pressure on yourself, because it will come back. And once you get back into a more normal version of you, once the chaos of life settles down again, your body remembers the attention that you paid previously and that you haven't been able to pay for various reasons.
That is so interesting. Yeah. It's also tied together. And it's like you say, I mean, and as life goes on, stages go on. Stress is another whole part of this that we have to find, really, really active ways to minimize that, because as we know, cortisol levels that could spike, and that's affecting, because all these are hormones, we're talking hormones here. The hormones is one system, I mean, it's many systems, many different hormone systems that really, they bounce off each other. And it's so important for, to be as close to, what normal is for you, just to, to feel your best. So I am on hormone replacement therapy. So I went down the path, just like you were mentioning. I just tightened up my lifestyle, just trying to be more in tune with what I was doing. I did some herbal things, like maca root is one of them that I love. I continue to use that. Again, these are just natural adaptogens that we can put into our coffee or teas or smoothies or whatever. Just trying to bring in what's going to be an easy, sustainable thing to just kind of aid this process of, your hormonal levels dropping. But I had this conversation and I got a little pushback too. I got you're type 1, you're high risk. I did my own research and I said, well, I'll share this, I've never been on the birth control pill. So I've got a lifetime, and maybe you can speak into this because I'm no expert on the birth control pill, because I did not respond well to it when I was younger. So I was like, well, I had a lifetime of not putting hormones into my body. So doesn't that mean I'm on the upswing because I didn't add them, for 30 years? So, and I don't know if that helps sway them or not, but I started on, and again, it's quality, like everything. It's quality supplements. It's hormones that we know where they come from, the bioidentical. And it's really just real important to get with a practitioner you can trust that knows what your body's going to respond best to. So, So what about that? The fact that is that a fair statement? That what I'm saying?
I'm totally the wrong person to ask about birth control pills, because when I was at grammar school, I was on the pill for skin conditions.
Okay. Very common here too. Yeah.
My mom had read that this was really good for teenage acne, and she said, we'll get you an appointment with a doctor and we'll get you started on to one of the mini pill. And when I was diagnosed with diabetes, I was reading about the initial findings of the Diabetes Control and Complications trial. And one of the things which was in that copy of Diabetes UK's Balance magazine was things which could predispose you to developing diabetes were using birth control pills.
Interesting. So, there's a finding I didn't know about. I'm sure many of our listeners haven't either. Interesting.
I don't know if that's actually true. But at that, it actually terrified me to the point where I went, okay, that's it. I'm stopping this pill. That's it. The only reason I was on it was for skin. Nothing else in my life was exciting enough to actually make that happen, that it was necessary. But I remember thinking, never taking this again, never taking this again. And it had said something about increasing insulin resistance. And at that stage, I was like lying in a hospital bed, diagnosed 48 hours previously with a condition that was going to be with me for the rest of my life. Taking everything in and going, right, not doing that, I won't be doing this, I have to stop doing that, change my life entirely. And that was the one thing that really struck with me. So whenever I got married 2 years later, it was like, I can't take the pill. Over to you.
Yes.
I abdicated all responsibility for family planning to my husband because I couldn't take the pill. I had type 1 diabetes. So I have no life post-diagnosis. Use of family planning, contraceptives as a way of even comparing. So I think that might have been part of what was a driver, a bit like yourself, with being less reluctant to take HRT, because I didn't feel like there would have been a cumulative build-up. But that all goes back to what I was reading in the hospital in April 1993. Yeah. So how accurate that information was is probably another podcast in and of itself.
I totally agree. You know, I just kind of opened up that can of worms with that question. Yeah, because it just obviously I've thought about it when I was making this decision before, but I don't know if there's any evidence, to support that reasoning. Again, it's all good, but I did notice a huge difference, and I stay on what's considered a low dose, and and it's like everything we have to adjust. I mean, it's interesting how you were talking about too, about keeping an eye on how we're feeling, whatever medications we are taking, whether it's hormone replacement, and noticing how our body's responding and our diabetes is responding. And it's, we do the best we can every day and we adjust accordingly. And the same thing can happen, or the same decisions happen with any sort of outside therapy that we're talking about. In this case, getting the hormone replacement therapy. So, I mean, we're watching things anyway, so why not just keep an eye on that as well? Just add that into the mix. It's another hormone, just like insulin. So, it's such an interesting topic. It's and it's so specific, because then I think that's one thing that we really want to encourage everybody here is to listen to their body, ask questions, get some support, and to lean into other women that also live with type 1, and to feel more empowered over whatever decision you do decide to make. And do you have anything else that you'd like to add to that? Yeah, you've shared a lot of really good nuggets today. We appreciate it.
I think it's also worth remembering that for women who haven't any history of diabetes in their family at all, quite often just that phase, this life phase, the perimenopause, menopause, can be when they're first diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. And we know that that's increased significantly with women who've a previous history of gestational diabetes.
Yes.
So I think the interplay between the testosterone, the progesterone, the estrogen, insulin, C-peptide, amylin, all of the different hormones that really go up to maintaining normal reproductive health and normal glucose management in people who aren't as broken as us, but maybe one day will be. You can see that the interplay between those has such a massive impact on a wide spectrum of women, not just women with type 1 diabetes. So I think there may be more answers for people like us in literature around menopause and type 2 diabetes. But again, it's taken out key messages from that and not shaming or blaming yourself, or shaming or blaming other women who develop type 2 diabetes as a result of the different distribution of fat that we get when we reach this stage in our life. As my son very kindly said to me about 2 years ago, "Yeah, Mum, you're just getting older. You have to expect that you're going to put on weight." So, yeah, thanks. Thanks, son. Yeah, you're now disinherited from the family. That's it. You're on your own.
That's not what your mom wants to hear.
Like, really?
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So I think it's worth being mindful of the fact that it is something which affects all women, not just women with diabetes, but we do have a very specific data set that we have access to in ourselves, because we can see our change in insulin requirements. We can see our change in glucose levels.
Yes. Yeah.
And
I guess, yeah. And we can consider ourselves lucky, right, to have that data.
yeah,
Most
we're
women
maybe
don't.
more empowered than many other
Yeah.
women who don't have access to the tools that we have, which is not that I'm saying that everybody who doesn't have access to those tools suddenly needs them. Don't think that for a minute.
Right. Understood. Yeah.
But I think that use the information that you have, that you have about you, to inform and lead the conversations with your healthcare team.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's so important. It's so important, ladies, to definitely put yourself first. Don't be afraid to reach out. Speaking of reaching out, Dawnie, how can our listeners find you and stay connected with you? You do have a few support groups that you had mentioned, if you could share.
Yeah. So on Twitter, we have the Twitter group at Menopause Mither. So it's basically mother, but you replace the I with, or the O with an I. And that's because the girl who started up the group is from a part of England where they refer to themselves as mithers rather than mothers. So
I love it. That's cute.
It's it's very, very local to that part of England. I am also active on Twitter as at Midwife, and I share some of my menopause journey there. I'm also easy to reach on Instagram, where my handle is at T1 Dawnie, and that's IE at the end rather than a Y. And I've had a number of women contacted me over the past 18 months about their menopause journeys as well. I might not get responding to you immediately, so I work as well, as say. So don't be thinking if I haven't responded to you within a couple of hours that I haven't seen your message or that I'm ignoring you. Sometimes I'm just busy at work.
Yeah, understood.
Or sleeping.
How about that?
That happens too.
Yes, yes. Many of us are on different time zones, so sometimes that gets to be the block. Yeah.
I also have a WordPress site, and I think at Sugar Snap is possibly how to find me there. I'm never entirely sure what it is.
That's okay. You know what? I'm going to get all this from you, and it'll be in the show notes for our listeners to connect and reach out. So yeah, we'll definitely make it easy for them to be able to learn more. Well, I appreciate you, Dawnie. This is, and I feel like we just scratched the surface, because I wanted to just bring this topic up in general, just to have an open conversation and just to let women know that you're not alone. And if you're not in this stage yet, fortunately, unfortunately, you will be. But it's so nice to be able to know you're not alone and that you can get through it with grace and hope. And life does go on. It will be okay. I promise you that. And Dawnie and I are both examples of that. So we hope that you all have an amazing day. And again, thank you, Dawnie. Appreciate you. And this has been a pleasure. And I will link everything in the show notes, like I mentioned. And everybody, enjoy your day. And I hope this conversation made you think about some things within your own care and things to talk to your doctor about. And keep in touch. Until next time. Thank you for listening to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. Head over to iTunes to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thank you. And be sure to check us out at abundanthealthwithmelissa.com for our free resources. See you next week.